comparing the Bills drafts to some of their competitors. Now, this is not to say that, some of the things I'm about to read here, this is not to say the Bills are a bad drafting team or these other teams are great drafting teams. This is just to kind of put some interesting perspective and put some interesting detail into what the Bills' top competitors in the AFC have done in rounds 2 and 3 relative to what the Buffalo Bills have done. So if we're looking here at rounds 2 and 3, again, look at all those picks. Cody Ford, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham, James Cook, Harrison Phillips, Devin Singletary, Dawson Knox, Zach Moss, Spencer Brown, Terrell Bernard. You have the Bills' day 2 picks from 2018 through 2022 up on the screen in front of you. I'm going to read you some of the Cincinnati Bengals day 2 picks from that same time range, 2018 through 2022. Jesse Bates, Sam Hubbard, Jermaine Pratt, T. Higgins, Logan Wilson, Joseph Asai, Cam Taylor-Britt, and Zach Carter. If we're going by year, Bates and Hubbard were 2018, Pratt was 2019, Higgins was 2020, Logan Wilson was 2020, Joseph Asai was 2021, Cam Taylor-Britt and Zach Carter were both 2022. Now, for Britt and Carter, I think they flashed a lot as rookies, but again, don't want to make concrete decisions on a rookie right now, but they both performed well and were significant contributors, even from a rotation standpoint for Carter, but from a legit starter standpoint with Cam Taylor-Britt with the injury to Awuzie. Britt stepped in, made plays. Now, that's not to say the Bengals have hit on all their day 2 picks. They've also taken Malik Jefferson and Drew Sample. Jackson Carman, we'll still see what happens with him. They missed on several first-round picks in that time frame. They took Billy Price, center out of Ohio State, the year that they took Bates and Hubbard, so they hit in rounds 2 and 3 with Bates and Hubbard, but missed big time in round 1. Again, this is not to say that these teams are great drafting teams and that the Bills are a horrible drafting team, but it's a very interesting perspective. Let's look at the Kansas City Chiefs. So from that 2018 through 2022 period, some of their notable round 2 and round 3 picks: Mecole Hardman, safety Juan Thornhill, linebacker Willie Gay, linebacker Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, and then in this past draft, Sky Moore, Brian Cook, and Leo Chenal, all of whom contributed and played roles for the entire season, and then some even more so in the playoff run and then also in the Super Bowl. Now, again, I'm not saying the Bills are a bad drafting team. I'm not saying the Bengals or Chiefs are a good drafting team, but the day 2 results for each team from 2018 through now, whether in proven results or early returns from some of the 2022 rookies, they're much different, especially for the Cincinnati Bengals. And when you look at where the Bills have hit, they've hit on round 1, like we've talked about. The Bills have had a lot of success in rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7, which we're going to get to in the next graphic. But, while hitting on day 3 picks is a success for the Bills, and it has been a legitimate success, it would be a success for any team. There's a difference in hitting on a day 3 pick, especially a later round day 3 pick like 5, 6, and 7, versus hitting on a day 2 pick. Those day 2 picks, again, rounds 2 and 3, in theory, but also in a pretty decent amount of actuality in what we've seen, generally have the potential to either have a higher floor or higher ceiling or both than those later round picks. That's what makes them earlier picks. That's what makes them day 2 picks. Hitting on those picks, no pun intended, hits differently. That's why the Buffalo Bills hitting on Dane Jackson late is different than the Bengals hitting on Jesse Bates, or the Bills hitting on Gabe Davis and Christian Benford and DeMar Hamlin is different than the Bengals hitting on T. Higgins and Sam Hubbard and Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. Hitting on Gabe Davis in the 4th is different than the 49ers hitting on Deebo Samuel in the 2nd. This is the biggest pattern and the biggest takeaway in looking at the Bills drafts from 2018 through now in the Beane and McDermott era together. Granted, McDermott was officially in 2017, while Beane was officially 2018 and on. The Bills need to find more draft success in earlier rounds. Otherwise, they could continue to find themselves in this purgatory of year after year, having a multitude of needs where they're potentially addressing similar positions over and over again in a multitude of ways. Take the defensive line, for example. For a team that is so invested in the defensive line, they're still finding their footing in identifying and developing a core up front. And a lot of that is due to taking a top 10 defensive tackle in 2019, then taking an edge in the second round in 2020, then taking another edge in the second round of 2021, and them not performing to the level you've needed them to. 3 drafts in a row, the Buffalo Bills addressed the defensive line. 2019, 2020, and 2021. Ed Oliver, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham, Greg Rousseau. The only one out of those 4 that's a hit is Greg Rousseau. You had a top 10 pick, another first round pick, and then 2 day 2 second round picks. Then they signed Von Miller. We're still talking about the edge. The Bills have hit a lot of singles and doubles and mixed in a few home runs with their draft success holistically from rounds 1 through 7. They need more home runs. They need more pop in the lineup. They need more dudes who can take the pitcher yard at any point. That changes the dynamic of your lineup, and they need that dynamic. Having a lineup of all contact hitters can only get you so far. It's hard to constantly succeed always hitting for average and always hitting for contact. Again, the Bills on the whole have largely been successful in the Brandon Beane era with drafting, but rounds 2 and rounds 3, especially compared to their opponents, they haven't hit that level of expectation that you would hope they would. Again, look at who the Bills have drafted. And even if you're not watching, if you're on the audio only, I'll read it one more time. Rounds 2 and 3, just listen for the names and immediately think of the player and that level that comes to mind. So rounds 2 and 3 for the Bills: Cody Ford, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham, James Cook, Harrison Phillips, Devin Singletary, Dawson Knox, Zach Moss, Spencer Brown, Terrell Bernard. The Cincinnati Bengals: Jesse Bates, Sam Hubbard, Jermaine Pratt, T. Higgins, Logan Wilson, Joseph Asai, Cam Taylor-Britt, Zach Carter, Jackson Carman, Drew Sample, Malik Jefferson. Some of the misses there on the back end, but those first ones that are hits, legitimate hits: Bates, Hubbard, Pratt, Higgins, Wilson. Osai has flashed. Cam Taylor-Britt flashed this year. Still early for both of them, though, from a sample size perspective. And then again, the Chiefs: Mecole Hardman, Juan Thornhill, Willie Gay, Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, Sky Moore, Brian Cook, Leo Chenal. You are not, and as Titan comes in and says, we're not getting starters 1 through 3. That's the issue. And I think that's the piece, right? Like, you're hitting on the back end. And again, we're going to talk about it. You're hitting Gabe Davis and Taron Johnson in round 4. You're hitting Dane Jackson in round 7. You're hitting DeMar Hamlin in round 6. You're hitting Khalil Shakir in round 5. Like, those are still hits. Those are still wins. But it's different hitting in those later rounds versus hitting on early day 2 picks. It's just natural in terms of the types of players that are available at that time. You're not going to get the same level of floor potential or ceiling potential in players in the back end of the draft that you are in rounds 1, rounds 2, and 3. And that's a big issue for this team. We're sitting here talking about, it seems like year after year, but especially this past year, how much depth have the Buffalo Bills acquired, right? It's been a significant amount. It's the reason guys can get hurt and they can just plug in guys seemingly from anywhere and have success. Christian Benford, I'm not going to call him a hit yet because he was just a rookie this past year, but cool. Look what Christian Benford did this year. Look at what Dane Jackson has become. Again, we're going to talk about these more in depth, but all the success they've had on the back end, but those players are all somewhat and seemingly limited in their floors and their ceilings. If you hit on dudes in round 2 and round 3, you are hitting on guys that, again, in theory, but also in actuality, generally have the potential to have a higher floor or higher ceiling or both. Again, there's a difference hitting on Gabe Davis in the 4th round versus hitting on Deebo Samuel in the 2nd or hitting on T. Higgins in the 2nd. There's a difference in hitting on DeMar Hamlin or Dane Jackson versus hitting on Jesse Bates, right? Or hitting on Sam Hubbard. There's a difference in that regard. So this is a huge area. This is my biggest takeaway from the entire exercise, this entire episode. If you only have one takeaway from this episode, it needs to be this: the Buffalo Bills have been inconsistent and subpar in the value that they have gotten from rounds 2 and rounds 3. Now, That's not all on Beane. It's not all on the coaches. It's not all on the players. It's a multitude of all of those things, right? Maybe they picked the wrong players. Maybe they picked the right players, but they didn't get coached properly and didn't get developed properly. Maybe it's just on the player and there was, it was the right pick and there was nothing the coaches could do. The player's just not good enough, or doesn't put the work in, or doesn't progress the way you need to, so on and so forth, right? There are a multitude of reasons. It's not on any one person or any one thing, but cut and dry, point blank, when you look at it, the Bills have had more misses in rounds 3 and rounds 2 than they have had successes and have had hits. When you have more misses than hits, especially early, that hurts your team, especially when you need those picks and those players to develop for you. And I think what hurts even more with some of those draft picks and some of those results, these were the draft classes, especially, or these are the rounds that are going to help you with the pipeline and help you with talent development and progression and help you fill out holes and potential cracks, in the dam when you have to pay Josh Allen, when you have to pay Stephon Diggs, when you have to pay Dawson Knox. And looking at the Bills' miss rate in the 2019, 2020, and 2021 drafts from a second and third round perspective, it's really damning. It's disappointing. It's, again, as you move forward and Allen's contract goes into effect, those classes and in these rounds could have been, or still could be, I suppose, a great asset to the Bills. The 2019 through 2021 draft classes, but especially at the higher end, rounds 1, 2, and 3 had the potential to provide cost-effective performance as the nature of the roster expenditures change with Allen's contract, Diggs' contract, then Dawson Knox's, potentially Tremaine Edmonds, right? You had a lot of hope and potential there. And if you don't hit on those picks, you are capping yourself to a degree at the potential high-end talent that you can acquire. Again, that doesn't mean you can't hit on a Matt Milano in round 5 like the Bills did. Bills got an all-pro linebacker, and they drafted him in round 5. That's fewer and farther between. It's harder to hit on that consistently. And again, I bring up the Bengals and Chiefs examples, not because they're a better drafting team. And if you look at their drafts as a whole from 2018 to 2022, they have a ton of misses, right? First round misses. They have a way lower success rate, rounds 4 through 7, but they've hit on a bunch of those second and third round picks. And when you hit on second and third round picks, that usually means you're hitting on a guy with a higher floor or a higher ceiling or both. And it's the reason why it feels like, or seems like, or may actually even be that the Bills' competitors, like the Bengals and Chiefs, have more top-end, top-tier talent than the Buffalo Bills do. Holistically, the Buffalo Bills have a very good roster. They have a deep roster. They have plenty of depth. But how many studs do they have on this team, right? How many top-tier players do they have at their position as compared to other teams? Again, here's a good exercise. If you take the final 4 teams from the NFL season this past year, so the Eagles, the Niners, the Bengals, the Chiefs, if you throw the Bills in there, right, and you just do a draft and you're picking a team and you're putting a 52-man roster together, how many Bills players are you taking? And then if you're not taking Bills players and you're taking players from other teams, think about where they were drafted. A lot of them are going to be first, second, third round picks. You are going to have some of the outliers, like, again, George Kittle was a 5th round pick. Matt Milano's a 5th round pick. You have some of those dudes you can cash in on late, and the value is tremendous. But hitting in rounds 2 and 3 would go a long way towards helping this Bills team potentially get over the hump, strengthen the pipeline, but also, again, help improve how much top tier or top end talent you have. How many B pluses and A minuses do you have? How many Bs and above do you have, right, relative to where you were taken? How many high floor or high ceiling guys do you have? Usually guys with that type of mix of traits and or skill sets exist in those first 2 or first 3 rounds. That's where the Bills need to start hitting on more in rounds